Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Understanding Disability Pride with Ben Mattlin, hosted by the NASW California DisAbilities Council. My name is Helene Diamond. I am the current chair of the DisAbilities Council. Our council is open to all social workers. Our mission is to serve as a resource and address issues relevant to social workers and community members who identify as being part of the disability community or having a disability, as well as providing consultation and education to NASW members, as well as the community at large. The term disability is all inclusive. It includes those that are visible and invisible. Our next council meeting is on July 13th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. via Zoom. You are all invited. You can register by going to the NASW California event page. You can also email our council at NASW-CA disabilitiescouncil@gmail.com. No need to remember that. We will share email at the very end of this webinar. We will also be sending out an email following this webinar with our contact, registration link, and other information about our council. Cindy Chen, she's one of our council's public relations officers. She will be introducing our wonderful presenter today, and she will speak next. Thank you for all being here.
Thank you, Helene. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy. So, round of applause, clap, 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 clap. We have Ben Mattlin, and I'd like to do a little introduction, just a short one, so we don't cut into his time. Ben is a writer, editor, and an essayist. He has written multiple books about his experiences and perspectives as a disabled person. His most recent book is called The Disability Pride: Dispatches from a Post-ADA World. Now, this book explores the history of the disability pride movement and its impact and meaning to the disabled community through interviews and report. So how I learned about Ben was actually, I had the pleasure of reading or audiobook his wonderful Disability Pride book, and I myself became disabled about 4 years ago. So from a able-bodied person and learning how to be disabled, I find his book very encouraging and very inspiring and informational. So I really highly recommend everybody to check it out. And it's such an honor to have Ben join us tonight. And just a reminder, if you have any questions for Ben, you can always use the Q&A box, and then we'll go through the questions at the end. And if you have any comments, you'd like to welcome Ben, or you have any other comments for other people, you can leave it in the chat. There's also a show caption on the bottom if you need the live caption. Feel free to use the reaction button if you like. And so we're thinking about maybe having Ben speak most of the time and leaving about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you all for joining in on a Friday evening of a long weekend. First of all, I want to describe myself for those who maybe can't see. I'm an old white guy with not enough hair, graying hair. I'm wearing glasses, a headset microphone, a light blue striped shirt, dark blue jacket. Background is a bookshelf and assorted mess. I have learned to do that, introduce myself that way, because, access isn't just about ramps or, Braille or whatever. It's a very, very big, important concept that applies to a lot of people with a lot of different disabilities and chronic health conditions. All right, onward. I'm supposed to talk about Disability Pride. July is Disability Pride Month because July 26th is the anniversary of the signing of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was kind of our Civil Rights Act. I mean, it was really our coming out as a people, as a group, as a minority that had been discriminated against. I'm 60 years old. I remember very well what life was like before the ADA. And that's actually why I wrote the book I wrote, which we called Disability Pride after, well, I originally wanted to call it Okay This Way. But my publisher thought that, might take away from Lady Gaga and the queer pride movement. So we focused on disability pride, but kind of same idea. And it started about 5 years ago when I began to see things I thought I would never see. A giant billboard in Times Square for Olay, the beauty brand, with a visibly disabled model on the billboard, Chilean Mercado. Around the same time, Aerie, the lingerie brand, did a whole catalog, all models with disabilities and chronic health conditions. Crutches, wheelchairs, colostomy pouches, insulin pumps, prosthetics, all highly visible. A year later, a paraplegic woman wins a Tony Award for playing, the town flirt in the musical Oklahoma, a role that, as far as I know, had never been played by a visibly disabled person before. And I thought, something has changed. The ADA was about access to public places, about non-discrimination in employment and really all parts of life. But it never talked about, winning Tony Awards, becoming, models for cosmetics and beauty projects, objects of fantasy or whatever, and I thought, wow, what's going on here? Something has changed. This is a level, a degree of acceptance that I never imagined possible. And I thought two things are happening here. One, these people are saying, I'm not going to be shy. Look at me, I'm going to be publicly disabled. So publicly disabled, I'm going to be on a giant billboard. And, all over the internet, people post selfies on social media displaying all their prostheses or whatever. It's not look away. It's not I'm hiding. It's look at me. The second thing, I guess, I realized was that the gatekeepers of media, the modeling agencies, casting agencies, were suddenly open to the idea of using disabled people, visibly disabled people. They realized there's a market for it, I guess, but how did that happen? So I went back to try to connect the dots. I mean, after the ADA was signed in 1990, I got married, had kids. I was kind of, nesting. And I realized 30 years had gone by. A whole generation had come of age with disability rights, with an expectation of entitlement, which I never had. And I had lost touch, and I wanted to go back and see how did we get from there, from 1990 to today, and to this new generation of disabled adults and the society that they're entering. So that's kind of where I was coming from. And I learned a lot of the history. There's a lot of legal, political detail, but I think the main thing is around the time the ADA was signed in the 1990s and shortly thereafter, sociologists began promoting the idea of disability as a social construct, outside of sort of medical or well, I guess medical field. And this set in motion the field of disability studies. I think the first, I should have taken notes on my own book. Anyway, in the early 90s was the first disability studies class. Now there are hundreds of them around the world. You can get an advanced degree in disability studies. They're ranked in US News. So it's a field that did not exist when I was in school. Also in 1990 was the first documented disability independence march in Boston, I believe. But very quickly, these things began springing up every year on the anniversary of the ADA, all around the world. I mean, even where the ADA doesn't apply, but the Disability Independence March became Disability Pride parades, and they're everywhere now. That's sort of amazing, There were leaders of the parade, and their speakers, and their corporate sponsors, and huge crowds at some of them, particularly in New York. So that's been a huge change. But what does disability pride really mean? For my book, I attempted to interview as many folks as I could, disabled folks, particularly those under age 40, say, to get a sense of how they had grown up and developed in this post-ADA world. And one theme that kept coming up, partly because I kept asking about it, was, how did you learn to be you, to be comfortable in your own skin? And everybody had a different story. It's a journey for everybody to face what has become known as internalized ableism. And in fact, for most people, it's an ongoing struggle. But everybody has their own, as I say, their own journey and their own definition of disability pride. There are disabled folks, who reject the idea, who say, "What are you talking about? How can I feel proud? I hate the fact that I can't do things, or something hurts, or whatever." nothing to be proud of. Funny thing is, I found an article from before the ADA discussing this very point. I mean, this concept of disability pride has been debated for a very long time. The activist and writer Nadina Laspina was interviewed, and she put it this way. She said, "I hate menopause, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't want to be a woman." And I think that's a pretty good way to understand it. There can be aspects of being disabled that you'd rather live without. Some of it is due to obstacles, to the way society treats you, but some of it is, your own body, your own mind don't function the way you want. I think it's okay to acknowledge that. But, well, I myself decided from a young age, if I'm going to like myself, if I'm going to live with myself and feel good about myself, it's a package deal. I have to make friends with this disability. And people used to ask me as a kid, if there were a cure, would you want it? And I always thought, well, no. I mean, it was a scary thought for me because I was born with my disability. I've always had it. It's all I've known. And the thought of not having it was always kind of frightening. It's honestly not like I dreamed about walking any more than I'm more likely to dream about flying, or having X-ray vision or something. Walking never really appealed to me. But as I get older, yeah, there are aspects of my disability that frustrate me. But I can't imagine myself without it. I've written 3 books about it. What else would I do? It's shaped my whole experience of life and my perspective on things. So I think that is one aspect of what disability pride means for a lot of people. It's a sense of self-esteem. I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to minimize it. I'm not going to apologize for it. It is, I don't have to love it, but I have to accept it. That's one thing. But in writing this book and talking to a lot of different folks, and when I couldn't talk to them in person, I read their blog posts and other things they've written, their interviews they've given, and I was really struck by the depth of the disability community, the diversity and the strength of what disabled people do, indeed have always done, often not recognized historically, but disabled people have been, active contributors to society from day one, and they still are. And I feel that once you recognize your connection to this community and to this history, you almost can't help but feel proud. So I think the sort of second component of disability pride is connection to community. A number of people I interviewed for the book talked about that. Internet helps a lot of people a lot. A couple of people said to me, I thought I was the only one like me. I go online, I read, oh, I'm not the only one. It's not that unusual. I don't need to be so ashamed or embarrassed. So it's a community connection, I feel, is really vitally important. I think the third component is education. I think when you really understand, as I say, what disabled people do and have always done, when you understand the history of the community, it's I guess it's like any other group, but you know where you've come from as a people, as a community, you find pride builds up inside. It's really a proud heritage. So that's kind of the sense of it that I've developed from thinking about it, writing about it. I personally, I graduated from college and I couldn't get a job. This was before the ADA. And it's always a tricky thing for disabled folks in applying for jobs. When and how do you disclose your disability to employers? And I guess it comes up on dating sites too. I don't know because I've been married for 30 years, but that's what I'm told. How do you let people know about it and when? For me, I kept getting offers to write articles, but no offers for full-time employment. I was never hired until last year, thanks to Zoom. So for a long time, I really felt I have to hide my disability. They like my writing. I can write from home. I can send in, I used to fax in what I've written. I can do phone calls, more or less, but I can hide it. I can cover it up. And if I write about disabilities, and I started publishing essays, op-eds, things on various subjects, I just hope nobody sees it. Nobody that I'm working for professionally back up. Mostly I wrote for financial publications, nothing to do with disability. And it really kept those two sides of my identity separate for a long time. I had real fear, of being exposed as a disabled person. It would ruin me professionally. There was one time, about 20 years ago, I had to interview somebody in person. And I was scared. I had my, attendant go with me, and I brought a tape recorder. And well, when I got there, it turned out the guy I was interviewing was disabled also. I think he had Parkinson's or something. It was very nice. It was very helpful. And I thought, we really are everywhere. and maybe I don't need to feel so ashamed or whatever. But it still took me a long time to get to a point where I felt it was okay to have the two sides of me come together as as one person. It helps when I see the new visibility of disability, the representation of disability in media, in politics, in business. I think it helps me and other people to realize, that we're a part of society. Everybody comes from some background, and that's mine. And if I get any reaction at all, most people is, oh, that's pretty cool, or gee, I like your essay on some aspect of disabilities. It's not an obstacle. Maybe it was back when I was more secretive, but times have changed, which is, fabulous. So, no more minimizing, no more hiding, no more shame. That's a big part of disability pride. Now, you're all social workers. I have known people, well, not myself, who sometimes want to talk to a therapist, but there's a fear that the therapist will have certain, I don't know, unconscious presumptions about disability. In fact, this is true for all kinds of medical practitioners. There are studies about, doctors, nurses, and things, assuming that disabled people have a poor quality of life. And I've always felt for medical doctors that people like me represent a failure of their profession. I mean, not to me, but to them. I think a lot of doctors and nurses get very uncomfortable around me, people like me, and they're not really trained. Surprisingly, they're not trained to deal with disabled patients. I hope and trust that social workers are better, are better in that regard. But I have talked to people who specifically seek out a therapist with a disability, assuming they won't have to do a lot of explaining, a lot of, educating the therapist. I certainly have some experience with that, though. It was many years ago. My wife and I went to a therapist, and well, we both felt she was unfair, and we would stop seeing her. She would talk to us separately and say to my wife, who is not disabled, she would basically say, come on, admit it. This isn't going to work for you, or you're frustrated, or how can you possibly be happy this way? She would ask or suggest that I do things I'm not capable of doing. We did not stick with her. I had to find somebody else and it worked out. But anyway, there is a danger, I think, for social workers and any kind of service provider of accidentally, inadvertently harboring, let's say, misunderstandings about disabilities. And what can be done? I don't know. I guess what you're doing is good. Having this group and having me talk and reading books and trying to understand better and get up to speed. I think that's helpful. But of course, every disabled person is different and has different issues and needs. So I guess, it's best not to assume, and it's fair to ask, I think, if there are questions. But one needs to be aware, I think, I guess we all do, of our own prejudices, for lack of a better word. So I hope, if anything, you come away with that understanding too. What haven't I covered? Let me see. I could be open to questions if there are any.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ben. That was very, very inspirational. I mean, I already have a lot of questions and comments coming from myself. But I like to kind of open the floor up to see if anybody,
Yes.
Helene, would you feel like we would like to kind of do like maybe participants can ask questions to Ben directly, or how do you feel about that?
I said one question to you. Did you get that one, Cindy?
I did not. Oh, yes, I did. Okay. So Ben, here's a first question for you. From what you have learned about the factors that create disability pride, for example, community connection, education, how would you recommend families, providers, community organizations help foster disability pride in individuals who have a disability?
Well, it's a good question. It's funny, I didn't talk about this. I should talk about this. Parents of disabled kids, I think they're a lot better than they used to be. But they're kind of a good example of what I think you're talking about. I feel like the best, I shouldn't use that word. Well, I appreciate the parents who make an effort to educate themselves and to introduce their disabled children to the community and community issues, activism, if that's how they want to go. I think that could be a tremendous thing. When I was small, there was no community, except perhaps medical charities. My parents got involved at the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and I was a poster child for a while, and I grew up to hate the organization because I think it's a terrible image for disabled people, being sick and pitiful and needing help always. That doesn't foster integration and inclusion or equality. But I know, well, I also know of the disabled folks whose parents were like, "You're never going to do anything. Don't have any dreams or hopes. You're stuck with me for life, kid." And that's terrible too. My parents were more on the, you can do anything you want when you grow up, which wasn't quite true, but I think it was a good message for me because, I had hopes and dreams and aspirations, and they were, they were aware and tried to provide what I would need. So I think that kind of applies to the community in general, teachers and, well, everybody really. I mean, when I was a kid, I hated being with other disabled kids. And apparently I'm not the only one. I've talk to other folks who felt that way too. So it doesn't always, work to kind of push community involvement. But it was when I connected with other disabled folks who kind of thought the way I did and had careers and ideas and articulated the issues facing us. That meant a lot to me. So I'm a little uncomfortable with parents and others who emphasize medical cures. Because I think the downside of that is that, you kind of mortgage your current happiness for this vague promise of medical advancement. I don't think we can do that. I think we need to, enjoy, learn to value our lives as they are now. And so I think joining the activist community is an important thing. But obviously there are a million accessibility issues, from obviously ramps and things, but the height of desks and counters and I can't even begin to. I mean, every disability has specific needs, and the more that's normal. Somebody said to me, companies ought to have a budget just for access modifications. So it doesn't have to be a big deal when you ask for something. I guess I'm getting a bit off topic, but I think there's so many ways to let disabled people know that they're valued contributors, and not make us do all the work of making things work. And that's true at every level, I think. I don't know, does that address the question adequately?
I think that was beautifully
Thank you.
explained. Thank you, Ben.
We get a sipper? Thanks.
One of our attendees has a comment. Let me unmute her. Her name's Christy. One second. See if I can do this. Yes. Hi,
Hi.
Christy. You should be able.
Yeah,
I
hi,
hear
Ben.
ya.
Thank you so much. I am totally blind and I do a lot of reading. And I'm wondering, because I don't think I saw your books available in the National Library Service,
Oh,
Braille and recorded books.
they're
Um,
all recorded.
are they through the National Library Service?
That I
And
don't know.
yeah, and also Bookshare is another organization that
Yeah,
works with authors, and I don't know if you're familiar with bookshare.org.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we depend on those two mostly to get our books. So I'm
Mm.
really hoping you can check into bookshare.org and also the National Library Service,
Yeah, thank you for.
NLS. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank,
thank you for that.
well, thank you for sharing, because I know I went to a disability studies conference and I was trying to remember what year it was, and it was in Texas. But I appreciate you, and yes, we all have different needs, but I'm really hoping that what I think would be good is to alert the public about things like my friend went to Walmart and one of those cart doors was, they're supposed to be at 80 inches height,
Mhm.
and it was at 54 inches height, and her guide dog walked through it like it was a door,
Mm.
and smashed her into it, and she had a brain concussion, head concussion. So
Ooh.
it's things like that, that if you see it, if you see something, say something.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Christy.
Good point.
Thank you, Christy. Ben, so I have another question for you. Could you highlight how you feel medical professionals could better assess and support their disabled patients when seeking medical care? You mentioned the assumption that one is experiencing a poor quality of life, for instance. Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, it's a funny thing, the ADA does cover doctor's offices, and yet access in doctor's offices is terrible. Examination tables are high, and there are no grab bars to help people get on them. There are grab bars in every public bathroom, but not in the doctor's office often. I've spoken to deaf people who say, they don't have sign language interpreters. And when we were all wearing masks, which is still a good thing, I think, for those of us who are kind of high risk and vulnerable. But for people who read lips, masks were a problem, unless they were transparent masks. Doctors often wear masks, even before COVID, but they don't, you can't read their lips. So there are a lot of basic ways that doctors' offices, medical facilities could be more accessible. There is a woman, a doctor with multiple sclerosis at Harvard, I believe, who's done a study that she surveyed her fellow doctors And, they admitted they are uncomfortable around disabled patients. They will turn away disabled patients. I have no openings, I'm busy, whatever excuse. They just don't want to deal with it. It's a complication. Plus, frankly, they have no training in how to deal with disabilities. But at the same time, a lot of the pharmaceutical testing doesn't take into account disabilities. I mean, there's a huge gap, I think, in medical knowledge. And then sometimes there are the little little slights that occur. I've had physicians look at me. I come in their office first time and, what's wrong with you? What happened to you? Well, thanks. Nice to meet you. There's that kind of awkwardness. And about a couple of years ago, I did a routine ultrasound, I think it was. MRI? Ultrasound. Anyway, I went to an imaging center and I waited in the waiting room. People went ahead of me. They came and went. After an hour, I was called to the front and the woman said, we can't help you today. So I've been here an hour. Well, we couldn't find a lift team. We need somebody to lift you on an examination table. So I brought someone with me, my attendant, my aide, who lifts me every day. No, we have liability issues. We can't allow that. Well, what if I sign a waiver? Oh, no. We can refer you somewhere else. Well, I left quite angry. I posted a review online that they were really unfair and they were wrong. I mean, yes, for access, I guess they have to offer to provide lifting assistance, but I'm not required to take it if I provide my own lift person. So they were legally wrong. And frankly, the excuse of liability issues, disabled people have heard forever. I mean, that's always the reason. We can't have a wheelchair blocking the aisle or whatever. It's a risk to others. What about the risk to ourselves? So these things happen. I think as a disabled person, we know we always face the possibility that, going about a normal day, these things can happen. It just, they make you, make you angry and hurt, and they shouldn't still happen in this day and age. So, this imaging center apologized because I posted a bad review, begged me to take it down. Come back again. Well, no, I never went back. I hope they learned a lesson, but it is unfortunate that the lessons have to be learned in that way.
Thank you, Ben. Any other questions or comments from our participants? And while we wait, I actually have to.
Good.
So, Ben, just from your experience and, just everybody you have interviewed and you have, just really, seeing what has been going on, what would you like to see change?
That's a good question. You know, I have a chapter about this. About 15 to 20 years ago, a group of disabled folks, mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area, mostly people of color or queer people, or both, who were disabled, started what they called the disability justice movement. Now that's a term that people have picked up and used, I guess wrongly, really. But the idea is that disability rights is great. The ADA is great, but it can only go so far. And to really have, justice, we need to recognize a lot of things that cannot be covered by the law. Now, I think they were specifically talking about the sort of intersectional issues that face disabled people of color or queer, trans, disabled people. It's not really appropriate for me to talk about it, I guess. I tried to be very careful writing that chapter to quote people fairly. But as I understand it, that the idea there are so many examples. For instance, there was a study not too long ago that a third to perhaps a half of people killed by police had disabilities. They either could not process or could not hear instructions to freeze, or they were having a behavioral issue that wasn't recognized appropriately, and they were shot. That kind of thing. There are so many so many obstacles for disabled folks that go beyond ADA regulations. I would like to see, more justice on those fronts. It gets more complicated, but disability justice has more to it than that. But as I said, I finally got my first full-time job last year because of Zoom, because of acceptance of remote work. When I read about people, trying to undo that, make people go back to offices, and to me, that, I don't think they realize it, but that's an access issue. That's a disability issue. A lot of disabled people need remote or hybrid work. Environmental issues, wildfires and smoke-filled air. But that affects people with breathing difficulties, say, more than others, people like me. So I think to really support disability justice, you've got to support environmental justice and racial justice and on and on. That's kind of where I see it going. I hope it's going.
That's why we're here, Ben. Thank you so much. And we can have one more question if you don't mind. I know Joni has her hand up.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Yes.
I hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for all you've done, and I'm sorry for what you've been through and the biases. Are there any recommendations you have for this council of how we can, as a team, help make a difference? And you're invited to join us. Yay.
Thank you. Well, this is good. Yeah, this is good having meetings and discussions like this. I don't know if they could be, if we could include sign language and interpreters and stuff like that would probably be helpful. I've always thought it's a little unfair for a disabled person to expect a non-disabled person or another disabled person with a different disability to, know what they need. I mean, it's got to be I think, a two-way communication. It gets tiresome sometimes to explain what I need, but as long as someone is asking and listening, I think that's really all we can ask. I think that's the way to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I love the idea of having an ASL interpreter, and that's something we should definitely consider moving forward. Thank you. I know we have only about a minute. Joseph, would you like to share the screen, and then maybe would you like to kind of share a little bit about how we can get that out?
So up on the screen here, we have our Facebook group listed. We have our next council meeting. That's on July 13th, Saturday, 30 p.m. We have the purpose of our council, which I already explained in the beginning, and our contact, as well as Ben, I think it's your most recent book, right, Ben? Display Pride.
Right.
I have a link for where you can purchase this book. And this pamphlet, or it's on the screen, it will be emailed to all registrants. Everyone will have this in their email. Any last words, Ben, before we end?
Last word. Let me think. Well, I don't know. If anybody thinks of something they want to ask me later, I'm always open to it. You can just go to my website, benmattlin.com, and you can email me through that. Because as I say, I think it is important to keep talking, to ask and answer and communicate.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's such a pleasure to have you. So just a little reminder, please follow us on Facebook if everybody haven't done so. You can just look up right here on the left side, follow us on Facebook, and then just type in the NASW California chapter, Disability Council. And I included my own Instagram if you guys want to connect with me. I have a lot of tips and tools for adaptive living. And again, Ben, we really, really appreciate you joining us. And, Ben's book is also available audiobook version. So if that's something,
Yes, all formats, yeah.
Yeah, I really, really, enjoyed it. So
thank you. And the paperback will be out in November.
woohoo!
So I'm told.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for being here.
This was fun.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone, and happy 4th of July.